career stuff. Start again. This week has been really busy with us encouraging you to think about careers and being prepared to transition to those careers. And so, um, one of the things that I have thought about a lot, especially as I've kind of risen through the ranks here, and I've been part of a lot of not only our search committees, but I've supervised a lot of people. I've dealt with a lot of supervisory challenges. I've worked with a lot of people who come to work with us, and this is their first, like, not their necessarily their first job, but like oftentimes the first job in their career. Um, and so I thought, like, over the years, I've kind of definitely learned a lot as a manager, but I've also noted some things that seem to be pretty common among people who are new in their careers. So that's kind of the perspective that I'm coming from today, and sharing a little bit about kind of some of the traps that I see people fall into, and just you know, my perspective as a hiring manager and supervisor of ways that that can be avoided, and some of the things that I've seen new employees come in with that really display in a very strong way and make a good impression from the very beginning. So that is our focus today. So the goals for today, because we always want to start thinking about what it is we're supposed to be doing, is to have you be thinking about how to translate your experience here at the college as student leaders, as engaged students, into workplace ready skills, to recognize and manage imposter syndrome, to show initiative without overperforming. We're going to break that down in a little bit and talk about there's a fuzzy line between those two things. So we'll talk about that. And just like I said, some of the common pitfalls that I see, kind of for you to be thinking about how you would be incorporating those career-wise. So why does this session matter? I think it's important because it's not about being louder or smarter or more impressive than your peers. It's really about how you can poise yourself to be an effective, grounded, and trusted employee. That's the goal that we're going for. And so a part of that is just really good self-awareness. A part of it is figuring out how to adapt. And a really big part of it is communication. And we're going to, you'll see communication is going to come up again and again and again. Whoops. Okay. So the myth of being the smartest person in the room. One of the things that I see from, I don't know, from time to time is people who start a new job and they have this expectation of themselves that they're going to start with some level of competence or perfection. So I have two teenage boys, a 18-year-old and a 15-and-a-half-year-old. And I often hear, I know, Mom, from my boys. And I'm like, bless your heart, you think you know. But you don't know what you don't know. And so one of the big challenges then is starting a new job feeling like you always have to prove yourself, and working to prove yourself as like your core goal rather than working to learn, to grow, to adapt new skills. a lot of fear-based decision making, like not taking chances because of fear of making mistakes, or making mistakes and trying to hide the mistakes that you make, feeling like you, in order to be heard, you have to speak a lot. So thinking more about like speaking in what matters rather than speaking consistently, and just, feeling that pressure to feel confident all the time. So instead, sorry, the pollen hit this week. I don't know if or last week, I don't know if you've noticed. You want to kind of reframe your goal and think about, your goal in a new job is not to be the perfect employee from day one. Nobody is. It's an unrealistic, unachievable goal. So your goal is to learn. Your goal is to embrace the resources that are given to you. Has everybody here worked at least one job before? Have you ever worked with a person that, rather than consulting the manual or the web page or whatever resource has been given to them, always ask you or another colleague to give them the answer rather than finding the answer themselves? How annoying is that? When you're like, it's in the freaking manual. Like, learn where to learn. So, using those resources and saving your questions and your ask for help to be really thoughtful questions, and really deliberate about the types of questions you ask, or to be able to say, I've checked here and here, I haven't been able to find the answer. Can you guide me to where I get this from? Following through, if you say you're going to do something, making sure that you do it is pretty important. And then when you can't follow through, or you can't meet a deadline, or you can't meet an expectation, communicating early and often about that. Every single person in this room at some point in time has overcommitted. Or we have committed appropriately, but underestimated the time said commitment would take. So the best possible thing you can do in those instances is, the second you realize, Houston, we have a problem. Houston, we may have a problem. That would be the time for you to say, hey, can we talk about this? Now that I've gotten a feel for it, I'm not sure that this deadline is going to be realistic for me. And that's part of that demonstrating responsibility and being accountable for your work. But that, letting people know that they can depend on you and that you'll ask for grace when needed, but you'll do it appropriately, as early as possible. So what I would say from working with a lot of people is the credibility of employees, and the ability to look at a new employee and be like, wow, it's going to take this person, they've got a learning curve. It's going to take them a while to learn this content of this job. But boy, are they asking the right questions. Are they really diving into the materials? Are they showing they are reliable and responsible about those things? As long as you're doing that, you get a ton of grace with how long it takes you to actually learn the skill of your role. So my discussion question is, has there ever been a time where you've kind of felt like that pressure to really prove yourself when you were maybe feeling out of your depth? Anybody want to share what that was like?
When I was at my job, I work as a peer recovery specialist. So the code of ethics for that is the most. It's like a law. It's like the most vague, like hard to navigate thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And I remember messing up like slightly over and over again. But my job was the fact, not that I was getting it wrong or right, just that I was taking the time to even read it. Like read all it's long. It's like pretty long. And like it feels like no diss. It feels like a philosophy class, like you read a bunch and there's still no answer at the end. But I love philosophy, just no diss though, no diss, no diss. But so it was really hard to navigate, but my job like loved it and they promoted me and they helped me do more stuff just because I took the time to read it and others didn't do that time. They tried to be right, just follow the guess. So yeah.
Good example.
I started off as a busboy in the hospitality industry, which is fine. But then I didn't realize that there were different tiers of industry in the hospitality industry. So I went from casual dining to fine dining, and still busboy, but the expectations were higher in fine dining, and they expected you to know when to put your hand behind your back and how to pick up a plate and how to place down. It was just a lot, and I expected to know without knowing, kind of like your children, a 15-year-old. But then because I was willing to learn, because I was willing to adapt, I think there was grace shown within the industry, and I think that helped me learn more.
A good example. Same industry, totally different set of rules, and often unspoken rules.
Exactly.
Yeah. Did you raise your hand as well?
I did not.
Okay. I won't put you on the spot.
Yeah, always that like for me, there's always that underlying anxiety. Like, am I doing this thing wrong? That like sometimes I will overshoot something because I have the fear of doing it completely wrong. But then, previous things happened. I had to kind of pull that back a little bit, read through everything I had to read, and then it was fine.
We're going to talk about that in a little bit, because that's a really good way of stating kind of that distinction between initiative and overproving. Like when you overshoot the mark, how sometimes that can be a good thing. Sometimes it cannot land well with people. So we're going to talk about that. For me, I will share an example, and this isn't a workplace example. This is an example from when I was 13 years old, and I decided that I was going to learn how to play tennis. Both of my boys play tennis, like for real, faux real. I played tennis for a week, and because I was not good at tennis in that week, I was like, this sport sucks. Look, I definitely felt the expectation that I needed to prove myself, that I need to walk onto the court a tennis player. Watching my children hone their skill over years and years makes me look back even more cringy at the time that I was frustrated that I couldn't prove myself and just like drop the tennis racket. I mic dropped with my tennis racket off the court. Okay. So, well, let me move this over. I've written 11 books, but each time I think, uh-oh, they're gonna find out now. I've run a game on everybody, and they're going to find me out. When I show who said this, you are gonna know this name. Anybody just want to take a wild guess?
J.K. Rowling or Stephen King?
Those are good guesses, and this person is probably every bit as well known.
Oh, that's a good guess.
That is a good guess.
It don't make sense to my brain, that's why.
Anybody else want to take a chance?
Suzanne Collins.
Nope. Oh. Sorry.
No.
Oh my God.
Maya Angelou. 11 books and still carrying that they're going to find out I'm faking it. I am not legit. I don't know what I'm talking about. So we're going to talk about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, I want to actually read the definition. Internal doubt despite external evidence of competence, most common during transitions, new roles, and first jobs. This is also pretty competent or common in really high achieving environments. So think the jobs that we hear are real pressure cookers. Medical school, doctors early in their careers is a big one. Um, like Wall Street stockbroker types.
Isn't like just like college students in general, don't they have imposter syndrome? But like I saw somebody say that, like it's like the number one reason people don't graduate. Or something, they're like, oh, I'm not good enough to graduate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that imposter syndrome is very prevalent, like in the art industry. Like when you produce a piece of work, and just, you don't feel like you're faking. You're like,
Yeah.
they're gonna see it's not good enough.
Yeah. I think too, Ryan, I know you're in the helping field. I think imposter syndrome is really, really uh, common in helping fields because many of us think, I really want to be a helper, but who the heck am I to be helping anybody else? Yeah, like,
Yeah. Sometimes it's not always good because, like I said, the ethics are like, you read it and you still have nothing.
yeah. So, some of the messages we tell ourselves when we're in the midst of our imposter moments. I tell you what, I think there's something else. That thing is just getting on my nerves.
The small one, you see the two blue dots?
Thank you.
At the end, two of them.
Yeah, the little bar on the left.
Bar.
Yeah, where your mouse was. You see the two bars above your picture?
Yeah, it won't click.
No, go over to the left. One more. Right.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh,
You can also put the one on the bottom if you click more.
thank you.
And then you gotta click, where is it? Hide video panel thing. Oh, that just did, oh, okay. My bad. What are those?
Hide floating meeting controls. Woo!
You got this.
Oh, we got it.
Y'all teaching me new skills. I am feeling like an imposter in this moment. I should know what I am doing when I give a presentation. So, these are the types of messages that we tell ourselves. My guess is everybody in here has felt like an imposter at some point in time. I am 22 years, almost 23. In July, I will have been here for 23 years, and I still experience this sometimes. But I have been around the block long enough to be like part of a VP search where we're bringing in new people for VP, and they get up there and they interview and they're answering questions, and I'm like, dang, I know more than them. So I do have like those moments sometimes with more frequency than I did early, a lot more frequency than earlier in my career. But there are still a lot of times. We hired someone here who had been a colleague of mine at another Virginia community college for a long time. And she, in my head for years, was like the smartest human that worked in the Virginia community college system. She was my go-to for so many things. And when she got hired on here, I was like, I am never going to look competent again because now I have to compete with her. No, that is not the truth. She is lovely. She is incredibly smart. She does not know everything. She does not do everything. But those initial messages were like, I'm just an imposter. She knows a lot. She'll find me out. So that's one of the things that we all cope with from time to time. And now I click somewhere else and it won't advance my slide. So, some messages that you can tell yourself when you feel these kinds of things. You can tell yourself, I have potential, even though I don't yet have the experience, the yet being the key to that. I don't have the experience yet, but I have a lot of potential, and my potential was recognized. My potential is what got me here. You have skills. You have the ability to communicate and problem solve, and you can navigate difficult situations. You guys have everybody here, ambassador? Has everybody here been?
About to be.
About to be? Okay. So between your jobs, between your leadership here on campus, those skills that you are developing, those soft skills, are more often than not more important than the hard skills of your job. Maybe if you're a neurosurgeon, your hard skills are more important than your soft skills. But for most of us, we go into fields where it's those kinds of things that make us stand out. If you've been a student leader, then you've probably got some real leadership experience. You've been able to convince people to collaborate on something. You've been able to plan an event. You've been able to facilitate meetings. You might have facilitated a meeting with people who just don't like each other. That kind of leadership, those things that you're developing, those are skills that you will use for the rest of your life. You are students who are able to take an idea and make it happen. I said before, I have 2 children. I have one child that will take an idea and make it happen. And I have another child who, when his arm is twisted, and there's some skin in the game, and there's some consequence if he doesn't, or some major reward if he does, will take an idea and make it happen. But generally speaking, it's like 2 kids, 2 different ways. But when you're able to communicate that skill of being able to take something from start to finish, to take a concept and make it real, that is a huge skill. And as a new employee, the real benefit is that you come fresh. You have fresh ideas. You can look at a broken system and look at all the rest of us who are like, well, it just is the way it is. That's how we've been doing it. And you can say, hey, would you like, what if we tried this other thing instead? What if we tried doing this? So like that fresh idea, that new energy, that new perspective, that is really important. You guys all know that I do those Dining with the Dean events. And a big part of why I started doing that is that over my 22 years here, as I have risen through the ranks and as I have aged, my perception gets further and further and further away from students. And so it can be easy for me to overestimate or underestimate the impact of things, not have thought them through. So to be able to hear from you, from your perspective, is really helps me do my job better. And that's the same way in a lot of instances. I'm going to drink something real quick. So, an activity. I want you to think about one leadership role that you've had. And then I want you to think about within that leadership role, what you did as a leader, what things you did, and then how the skills you acquired when you did the thing translate into the workplace. And then we're going to talk about it. So your role as a student leader, something that you have done, and how you would translate that skill into a job or a job skill.
When I was a facilitator at Martin's, I messed up real bad. And this may not be what you want to hear, but so I messed up because I cared about people that I was managing, but I didn't care about people who were managing me. And so But even though that wasn't the right thing, I learned to balance it. Like it taught me going into my next job, which was really important for this job, to manage it better. And it's not all about what this person wants, what this person wants. It's like a comp.
You kind of have to lead up and lead down at the same time.
Yeah, it's really strange.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anybody else? How many of you have held a leadership role in a club or organization? What did you do as a leader in that club or organization?
I tried, oh, sorry, I'll go first, everybody. I tried to give tasks. But something that I struggled with was relying on my team to fulfill the task or to fulfill the role. So sometimes I would just do it myself, which is not good. So there's, I guess, learning how to trust who I'm working with.
So you developed a skill of recognizing the value of delegation and also the importance of developing trust with the people that you work with so that you're comfortable with that. That is how I would translate that into a work skill. What else?
So I found out that my leadership skills are very poor because I tend to be a follower. I'm 100% a follower. Like, you tell me what to do and I'll do it. But trying to be a leader, like that really face that challenge. And I learned that it really takes vision. You need to have vision. You need to have a goal and be able to know how to execute it and be able to know how to explain it to your team so that they can also follow through with it. Because if a leader doesn't know what they're doing, then the whole team doesn't know what they're doing.
I think that is a wonderful skill. Like you have to have vision, you have to be able to communicate your vision, you have to get people to buy in to the vision. Like being able to articulate, these are lessons that I've learned. That's really good. Hi. Anybody else want to give it a go?
Maybe I would say trusting our knowledge because I am a CNA. I feel that I'm still pretty new. I have been working in a nursing home for less than a year. So there was maybe 2 months ago, I was working and my other coworkers, who were just two other people, they were newer than me and they didn't know very well what to do. So I had to really like think like internally like, okay, I need to trust myself and I need to recognize that what I'm doing is okay. I cannot keep like telling myself what well I'm still pretty new or like my knowledge is not good enough. But in comparison to my other coworkers, they needed someone to help them with activities that they didn't know how to do. So kind of like look internally and validate what you know. Don't try to make you feel less.
I think that is a great skill. And I'm going to tease that out a little bit further because I'm going to say you inserted another skill in that, and that's the ability to mentor new employees. The ability to help them to develop as employees is really important as well. So we've articulated some important skills here. So earlier, I alluded to this difference between initiative and overproving. And so we all hear you want to take initiative. Our director of advising, Greg Anderson, and I were talking about this presentation this morning, and he said, he was not on a college bound track as a kid. He was very much on the you're going to get a trade because that's what you're good for kind of track. And so he went to technical school when he was in high school and VOTech. And part of that was you get a job working out there in the field somewhere as a part of your schooling. And so he got a job on a construction crew, like, as a high school kid who was learning. And he said one of his bosses early on told him one of the most important things that has helped him through the rest of his life, which is always be busy. If there is nothing else to do here on this construction site, you grab a broom and you sweep up. You don't stop, you don't stand still. If they don't have a task to give you, you find a task for yourself. So that's good initiative. Like I said before, asking questions, but making sure they're thoughtful questions. Being careful to only offer help that you can realistically provide. In customer service training, they will talk about the value of under promise and over deliver. That skill of under promise and over deliver will help you over and over and over again, because it even if it's an illusion, it creates an illusion that you go above and beyond every time. You make a promise, you meet that promise, and you exceed it. That's a good strategy. Taking ownership of your own learning. Students here who take calculus with analytical geometry, which is like the trigonometry-based calculus for engineers. As you can imagine, that class is not a cakewalk. So when they first take that class, a lot of them are like, oh, doing. And so what we encourage them, go online, go on Khan Academy, go on mathbids.com, go, to one of the gazillion different places you can go online and search the keywords from each lecture. And maybe you pre-watch a lecture before you go into the next class, or, before you ask for help, you try to see, hey, if it's explained to me in a different way, will that make a difference? So like taking ownership is really important. And then offering ideas with curiosity. Like, what does that mean? Offering the ideas with curiosity is this idea of, well, have we ever tried? Or what do you think would happen if? Or I would love to try approaching it from this direction. That kind of like, I'm not saying I know better than you. I'm not saying I know what's right, or I know how, in the words of my kids, I know, Mom. It's not that. It's like, I'm interested to know how these things integrate. I'm interested to know how I can support or influence this. So that idea of curiosity. You talked earlier about overshooting the mark. And so that can mean a lot of different things, but for the purposes of this, there is this idea of overproving and you may have experienced this with other people in the past. Has anybody ever worked with a know-it-all? Yeah. Anybody ever had a friend who was a know-it-all? Or a step-grandfather who was a know-it-all? That is it's a challenging type of person to work with. And most of us naturally aren't know-it-alls, but we can fall into the trap in a new job where we feel insecure, we feel like we need to prove ourselves, we've got some imposter syndrome going on, we want to show that we care but aren't quite sure how. to show that we care, especially before we're really competent at our new job. So we all have this risk of making errors that look like overproving. So that would be over promising and under delivering, is a bad step. Talking to be noticed rather than talking to contribute. You've probably been in a class with somebody who talks a lot to be noticed, and they talk a lot and they say very little. I was in a job interview with somebody recently, and I was like, that man used a lot of words and said nothing at all. And there's this idea of like fear-driven perfection. Like I have to do it right. If I don't get my A, I am fill in the blank. If I miss dotting an I or crossing a T on this report that I'm turning in, if I haven't correctly interpreted every single line in the code of ethics correctly, if I answer a question incorrectly because I thought I had it right, like we all make those mistakes. And if you live where you are always shooting for perfection out of fear of what's going to happen if you mess up, you are then a difficult person for other people to work with. So showing yourself grace, giving yourself that room to learn. Overproving yourself is exhausting. Feeling like I have to give 1,000% all of the time, or they will realize I am not cut out for this job. That is an exhausting burden to carry. So, think about then how can you reframe from overproving to initiative. So, again, it's like thinking about the ways to say things or present things. I'm still learning, but one idea might be, or I'm really interested in this project, and I know I don't know everything yet, but I really feel like if I could take the lead on this piece of the project, like trying to kind of keep those things in check. Would it be helpful if I fill in the blank? Those kinds of questions. Yeah.
Work in a fear-driven workplace.
That's a really good question. What if you work in a fear-driven workplace? My advice as a seasoned individual is spend a lot of your time outside of that fear-driven workplace finding a different workplace. Because unhealthy, toxic workplaces don't typically get better unless there is drastic leadership change. And they, bit by bit, break your spirit.
Facts. Yeah.
Toxic workplaces like that suck your initiative out. Quiet quitting. Have you heard of this concept of quiet quitting? It was like all the rage in the literature for a while, where people do just enough. They, my goal is not even a C plus. I'm going for standard C employee.
I used to, I don't know if anyone else can relate, but I used to work in like a retail store. And I used to be a facilitator, like I said, and I tried to go beyond. And then they used fear against me and pushed me back down. And I did that, like quiet quitting, just bare minimum. Got the bare minimum number, got the bare minimum everything. And it really did suck the initiative out. It did. So that's true.
Yeah.
Because it was definitely fear-driven perfectionism. If you got under the number like 3 days in a row, you got kicked out or got a penalty or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's that's hard on your body. It's hard on your mental health, to live like that long term. And even worse, when you are a person who's used to being a high performer and a hard worker, and you're used to being valued and appreciated by your coworkers, and you lose all of that. You're not valued and appreciated. You're not recognized for your talent. And internally, like, I'm not giving it my all. This place sucks. Like, I'm not giving them an ounce more. It does not feel good to be the person that is a C plus employee. Yeah, it does. All right. So now, we've talked a little bit about like the things you can do to kind of build yourself up, things to avoid. And so I do want to talk a little bit about this phenomenon that we are seeing with younger employees these days. I'm guessing everybody in this room, I'm doing a dangerous thing. I'm estimating that everybody in this room is somewhere in the younger millennial, older Gen Z generational space. And so there's been a lot of research on Gen Zs in particular here recently in the workplace. And you see just like, so if you ever look at your feeds, your algorithms are probably pretty different than mine. I get a lot of like things that are geared to people that manage people that show up in mine. So there are a lot of articles about how Gen Zs are lazy, don't know how to talk to people, afraid to answer the phone, uh, really good at technology, but really suck at people. These kinds of things. And, what a god awful generation they are to hire. And so I do want to talk a little bit about that because there is a fair amount of data that shows that for a number of reasons, AI being in the drastically changing landscape of work being a big part of it, the impact of COVID and that year of isolation that hit, like there are a couple of things that have kind of coincided at the same time. And so I found this quote. As I was doing some research, this article in Forbes that really resonated with me. Every few decades, a new generation walks into work and gets blamed for breaking it. Ambitious boomers, cynical Gen Xers, entitled millennials, and now it's Gen Z's term. Unprofessional, unprepared, unable to cope. Those are the themes that come out. Some of the data is a little scary. 6 in 10 employers admit they've already fired at least one Gen Z worker within their first months of hiring them. A third of Gen Z employees are fired from their first job. What makes it even scarier is that Gen Zs that become managers, about 50% of them will not hire Gen Zs. And so some of this data is kind of worrying and makes it really important to understand what's happening here and how do I position myself so it doesn't happen to me. A pretty big piece of that falls on employers, right? If we don't figure it out, we won't have a workforce. So we have to figure out how to help people bridge what is sometimes a skills gap. But that's not what today is about. Today's not about how because you don't have any control over how employers figure out their own self. That's I did share some of this with our HR department as I was learning and reading, like, oh, there's some things that we probably need to do differently here to be better prepared and better poised for younger workers as they come. But so they note here, the accusation is familiar, but the conditions have changed, and therefore the outcomes have changed. And so I want to talk about the reality of this. So here are my lessons from a manager that I would encourage you to think about. The first is intergenerational issues matter a lot. So, boss, what does T mean? Not the liquid, me, background information, but more like gossip. Spill the tea means informally contextualizing. Boss, so I should ask the CEO to spill the tea on X project? Please CC me if you do. I want to see the reaction so bad. So spill the tea is a minute or two dated on this one. But I was watching some different videos about like, the pitfalls or the inability to kind of read the room that happens sometimes with language. And that is just so important. And language is so generational. I mean, I'm still saying things like peace out, yo. Like those were my days. Yeah. Good. So, thinking about how to present things, I was looking at memes and there were so many memes. It was really hard to pick out which one, but you know, all the things now, it's giving whatever, fill in the blank. That like generational specific language often rubs people the wrong way. And it is perceived one way in an informal setting and another way in a professional setting. I skipped ahead, but that are we speaking the same language? Is anybody familiar with the concept of code switching in language? Do you feel comfortable trying to define it? Not quite.
Oh, wait, no, you can go.
There you go.
I probably got it wrong. Oh, all right. Is it like trying to speak like they do, copying them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So code switching, the term has been around for a little while. I first heard about it. I first learned of it when I was taking a class on Virginia and the different regions of Virginia. And so Appalachia, kind of the far west, if Virginia's the triangle, in the tiny little part of the triangle to the far west, they speak a different, it's not a different language, they speak English, but they speak a different language. And so one of the skills that they've developed is I speak in an Appalachian way of speaking when I am with my people, and I keep my accent, but I speak with different words when I am not with my people. I choose different words. I choose different expressions. Moms, like I call my mom mom. I've never called my mom moms. Moms is kind of an Appalachian thing. So, a person might say, hey, moms, what's up? And then when they go into the workplace, say, well, my mom, blah, blah, blah. So this idea of code switching is kind of thinking about what do you do in your personal life, in your interpersonal communication with friends and family and, out at the club and whatever, versus what do I do in a professional presentation or when I'm speaking with my boss. People have always done it, right? Like I use 7 times more curse words when I'm not at work than I do when I'm at work. Like I code switch. My language changes. The way that I communicate, the tones that I use are different at work. So be really thoughtful about that. But the intergenerational issues are bigger than that. the whole hybrid and distant work, the perceptions about that are very, very generational. Very generational. Um, that that idea of I need to have proximity to you to be able to trust you is very ingrained. The older the population, the more ingrained that concept is. And it's that connection isn't so recognized among new workers at all. Technology. My mom has an iPhone, and it is something. Bless her heart. I went to AT&T the other day because I'm switching phone plans, and I was like, okay, you need me to do this and do that. It was complicated because I have some off-brand phone provider currently. US Mobile does not make it easy for you to switch to somebody else. So I had to do all these things before it was even possible for me to switch. And I was like, I could tell this young buck that was helping me, I was like, Lord, the way my mother is to me, I am to this young man. And finally, I was like, would it be a lot less frustrating if I just handed you my phone and let you do it? And he was like, yes. I was like, thank you. Here, have it. And I'm pretty technology savvy, but I am, I have to actually read and think before I click buttons. And that guy was just like, there. So saved us all about 30 minutes, I think. Technology is tough, but technology is such a strength among younger employees in the ability to develop patience and skill with training older employees, really important.
With technology, I had in like the same company, I had one person in like a Zoom meeting say, if y'all turn all your cameras on, I'm shutting the meeting down. And I had another person say, cameras on, cameras off, talk, don't talk, I don't care. Wear pajamas, wear them. Like it's a totally different vibe.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
We use Teams here. Other places use Slack or Jabber. There are a few different versions of it.
Yeah.
We're a Teams school. When you look at who uses Teams, the younger the age, the more we Teams. The older the employee, the more resistant they are. And they're like, I need that to be an email. And I'm like, you really could have just been like, yo, here's what's up in a Teams. And that would have been sufficient. So I'm going to phones. I'm not Gen Z, and I don't call unless I have to. And I told my mama the best Christmas gift she could give me is not leaving me a voicemail. Just text me. If you don't get me, just text me. I don't want to have to check it. So I have a little funny for you here. I love comedians. That is my happy place. Oh, That's my little funny about phones. Work is weird because work does not evolve in the same way that society evolves. We live and die by phone calls and emails, and yeah, we teams, but some of us teams, not everybody teams. Um, so a skill to work on developing is that comfort um, with the types of interactions, whether it's phone calls or something else. Develop comfort with the types of interactions that right now make you uncomfortable, that make you go, oh, I don't wanna. Build that comfort because you have to have this like whole, fully rounded um, set of skills in the workplace. And the ability to dodge the pieces that make you uncomfortable um, are they just don't exist in the workplace the way they do in the rest of life. So that is a huge piece.
I've experienced it being backwards too. Like at my current job, they don't like it when you call. Like, don't call your boss, don't call. Like they only want texting. And for me, that's the barrier. I'm going like backwards because I like calling. I'm like, yo, like, hit me up. I don't like texting. And so I have to work through that backwards because I'm like, I can't express myself right through texting. So I've had to learn how to do it because I'm always going to call them. You know what I mean? So I think it goes both ways depending on the workplace. Yeah. Yeah.
And there will probably eventually be some kind of balancing out where, like right now, there are times when there are things I needed to address, and I don't dare send it in email because I know how it's going to land. Like it's a face to face conversation. Um, I think we will eventually we've overcorrected one way, we'll eventually end up in the middle. But all of us have to be comfortable with the kinds of communication that technology has largely enabled us to avoid. And that's a big skill. And then the last lesson from a manager is mom and dad wanting to be involved as an advocate for their adult children in the workplace. We see this a lot in education. Um, Mom and like one of my colleagues the other day was like, I have a mom who wants to have an advising appointment with me, and her son who is our student not be here for the appointment. And I'm like, that's not a service we provide. We don't provide parental advising. So we have to figure out how to communicate that. But this is not a problem for the vast majority of people. But for some people, it is such an enormous problem that it keeps them from being employable. Mom or dad calling about how their interview went. Mom and dad calling to make the interview. Mom or dad calling to complain to the boss that boss was mean to little Jimmy. That type of thing is becoming more and more prevalent in workplaces to the point that they like now provide training for employers about how to deal with it when your employee's parent calls to complain that you were mean to them. So we oftentimes don't encourage our parents to be helicopter parents. They've developed that skill all on their own. But figuring out how to break the pattern or figuring out how to at least warn your employer that like my mom is a little off the chain here, and if she calls, please hang up on her. Navigating that, I can't believe that I have to put that in presentations these days, but it is so common that we have to say, like, if you ever want to not get an interview or not get a job or immediately get fired from a job, have mom and dad engage in the process. So, the last thing, going back to language, language, I mentioned earlier, like the the little Gen Z-isms, but I will tell you that my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, my generation also has some language issues because good God, we love a buzzword. We want things to be scalable, or we want to put them in the parking lot and come back to them later, or the circle back. And oh, we call things like, the corporate, the fox and the den strategy. Like, oh, we love a buzzword. So part of this is I'm not just it's every generation has these things. This one happens to be a real pet peeve of mine for the people with the people that I work with. There's a couple in particular that, oh, they love a buzzword, and buzzwords kind of make me go like this. So this idea of speaking the same language, there's like none of these things are wrong there, but there's a like meeting in the middle in the workplace, and the better you can position yourself to meet in the middle in the workplace, to communicate well, to represent yourself well, to show initiative, but not cross the line into I know better than you who've been here forever. To feel it when you're feeling the imposter syndrome, and then change your internal messaging that you're giving yourself from they'll find me out to it's okay, I'm still learning. Learning is not failure. Learning is a process. It's an evolution. And so all of those messages you tell yourself are really important as well. That is it. I did not tell you the time that I almost got fired. And I could tell you that story if you want, but our time is now 5 minutes over. So I don't want to hold you if everybody is ready to get out the door. Want to hear the story? Okay. So if you want to, I'm going to spill the tea. When I was 16 years old, I got my first job as a tour guide for Dixie Caverns in Salem, Virginia. And as a tour guide, there was like a gift shop, and like it was a whole pottery. If you know what like a pottery shop, not like just pottery, but like knickknacks and like a home goods of days past. We had that. We had a Christmas shop. There was a RV park attached to it. We were a one-stop shop for a lot of things. And so when you weren't giving tours, you were expected to support operations. You were going to be stocking things. You might cover the cash register, whatever. Well, I grew up in a house where my dad would commonly say, I ain't raising no half-asses. A lot. Heard that a lot. A job worth doing is worth doing well. That one, it makes my sister want to smack people whenever somebody says that. Work ethic was like beaten into us as children. And so I was like, first job, I got to bring my work ethic. I am going to work harder than anybody else in this building. They're going to be so impressed by me and how hard I work. And this is not a humble brag. This is a lesson learned for me. I was a very hard worker, and I got a lot done while I was there. I did not connect with my manager or the owner or the other kind and wonderful people with whom I worked, because I was busy busting butt, getting things done and proving myself that I was a hard worker. I failed to read the room. I failed to read the colleagues. I failed to recognize how important communication and building relationships and networking was at work. I also had to give tours on a cavern, having not a ton of training. So, like, my imposter syndrome that whole time, I was like, I hope what I'm saying is right. I'm gonna fake it till I make it, giving these tours. It was that was a daunting thing stocking shelves was so much less stressful than that. So I was like, I'm gonna stock some shelves. Like this Christmas shop that we're never gonna run out of ornaments. I'm gonna make sure it happens. And I got a set down from the person who owned the place and said, I don't know why you think you were so much better than us, but if you can't figure out how to fit in here, this is not going to work out. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to figure it out. And I did pivot and I did figure it out. And I ended up working there 4 years and I got promoted and I got really good at being a tour guide. And I got awesome tips and I figured it out. But I was very close to being like, you don't belong here. And it wasn't me just trying to be I worked so hard at proving myself that I didn't put in the work with all of the other most important soft skills that you need in your job. So learn from me. Don't be goody two shoes. I'm gonna show you all up because I am such a phenomenal shelf stacker. Don't be that. Learn from my mistakes. Find that balance. Balance is important in everything. So, any questions? Thoughts?
It was great.
Good.
I learned, I would be the first person to talk about overdoing I've ever heard. I feel like just people say be a hard worker, but they never talk about overdoing it.
Yeah.
I quit my job because I was an overdoer and I didn't realize it. So I'm glad you talked about it.
I think it's, we use the term read the room a lot, but it's bigger than that. It's also, I had this boss who was a very interesting human, and there were a lot of very fascinating things about her. But one of the things that resonated with me the most was she talked about the value of learning how to speak into somebody's listening. And I think that's the best skill you can develop. And it is kind of a read the room, but it's not just read the room. It's also like, I'm thinking about you as a human. How do I need to construct these thoughts and share them in such a way that you can be open to hearing what I have to say? How do I have this hard conversation in a way that doesn't immediately make you defensive? How do I construct my logic and my argument in a way that taps into the things that you value so that I can bring you on board with this idea? And that I was young. I was 16. I was an idiot. I didn't know all of these things. Like looking back now, I think of so many times when I was fighting the good fight, or I was behaving in a certain way that I thought was expected of me, but I wasn't paying attention to the people I needed to pay attention to for all of the nonverbal and verbal feedback that they were giving me. And I was thinking about what was important to me, not what was important to them, and changing that perspective. Learning, and that was a process of learning how to, think before I speak. Let me think about how to do this in the best possible way for that human being to take what I have to say and to take it to heart. I work with a lot of difficult student situations here. Students that have been suspended, dismissed, students with conduct issues, students who are having problems, conflicts with faculty, conflicts with other students. I work with a lot of difficult situations, and I don't always get it right, but that's always the thing that I try to do. Even when I have to have a hard conversation with you, how can I frame it in a way that speaks into your listening? That's always my goal. And it's not always easy. There are a couple people here I've worked with for a decade, and I'm like, I don't know. I've tried 85 different things and none of them have worked. I have no idea how to speak into that person's listening. No idea. But a lot of times I think I do okay. Any other thoughts? Y'all didn't grow up with Jerry Springer. He always had a final thought. All right. Well, thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
I was like, I'm going to have like one person in the room and feel really weird about getting